try that. I thought we'd just open it for questions and comments. It would just be interesting to have a bit of a dialogue, how these ideas translate into the context here in Denmark. Comments, questions that we can sort of go forward with this? People probably have very specific areas of interest that maybe want to get addressed. Is it the etiquette to ask questions in forums like this?
Or maybe we could also, if some of you have some comments on how do you think the approach of Michael Ungar could be, or can be, I hope, can be applied here in Denmark?
Just pause there. Way back there. Hi.
I can't help thinking that with the political discourse right now, we're talking about the competitive society, and we have a lot of emphasis right now on academic results, and there's a new public school reform that's supposed to start this August. But when you think about resilience in connection and creating an environment for children who are socially at risk, then I have to admit that I find that kind of hard to put into the same context, honestly.
You mean, if I'm understanding, that the emphasis is all on academic outcomes?
Yeah, on academic results. We are very focused in Denmark on how we are positioned in, for instance, the PISA.
Yes. We see that in Canada too. But it's an interesting one that there's actually two dimensions. I mean, this kind of lack of complexity when we're talking about resilience, there's always the cultural bias towards one set of outcomes. So the PISA scores, in terms of academic grades, are always held up as a measure of capacity or resilience. But I'm actually more focused on engagement at school, which isn't necessarily related to academic outcomes. I would rather have all the vulnerable children in my community actually attending school and feeling like they belong in an educational environment, regardless of what their academic achievements actually are. Because we know that children who are actually engaged at school tend to be protected against child abuse, social marginalization. They may not all go to university, but they will at least have a sense of cohesion in their communities and are much more likely to be streamed into some sort of productive role into society. So I don't see us measuring academic engagement as a national goal. I want children not just to do well on their grades, I want them to feel like school is a place where they belong. That would be a more holistic interpretation of resilience. If that makes sense. It's a great point.
Good day, Fabian. My name is Fabian, and I just live across the street over here in Northwest. And I think that we are missing some very important thing for the time I'm being here, very short time I've been here. But the area over here, we have the lowest participation in any election around here. And at the same time, we have the biggest capacity of cooperative business going on at the same time. It's the housing companies. And in this room, probably in 4 or 5 years, we will have a lot of you working in these areas. And the interesting thing, I've been watching this game for the last 30 years, and you haven't changed shit, I'm sorry to tell you. You have even done it worse and I'm talking about social class, I don't talk about you as an individual people. What have been going on over here, and in any suburb of Copenhagen or in Aarhus, is that we have been paying a social class to fulfill their goals of using their education. But we haven't thought about how we're going to make these children become scientists, because you don't have the answer. Because if we have a school whose goal is that everybody should be a professor, because if you look at what is going on, that's what's happening, and more than 50% of the boys cannot do it. Then we have a system who create a problem. And at the same time, we have people protecting this system every time you discuss it. Every time I discuss this in any institution in Denmark, people get mentally violent. You get excluded by saying the truth. I went to this school and I say the truth about in Vollsmose. They had like used 75 million kroner in 3 years. 20 people working there. And they did not even employ one colored person or one person from the area. And this is a theft. This is a social stealing from one class to another class. And as long as we don't address this problem, and now I'm going to go back to the solution. Over here we have a tremendous big amount of capacity of young people who have resilience. I'm sorry, it's a new word today. But nobody is participating about giving them a democratic upbringing, because this is what is the thing in this society we have. If you understand the game, then you can get far, even with any mental disease you have. So if we want to change this, I'm sorry I take all the time. I could speak many hours about this subject, but I think the problem is the arrogancy and the stealing from one social class from another social class. These guys over there, they are CPR numbers. If you have enough of them,
You respond.
if you have enough of, I'm going to stop now. If you have enough of them, you have a pay for the month, and you can go on holiday.
Thank you.
I think I would like to say thank you very much. And I think it was super great. What you are saying is that we have like a parallel system going on. One is that we follow the Declaration of the Human Rights. We put it into our laws in Denmark, legislation and so on. But we also have another parallel trait going on. And that is that we have more people in the group being relatively poor. So we have more idea that economy, it is out of reach of democracy. And we have like it's something else. We have been brought up with that. Economy is one thing, and social organization of the society is another thing. And I think we have reached the limit for that, simply because now we have the climate change, and because it seems like it's not possible to expand the economic growth more than we are doing, and also because we are dividing people into different groups. I fully agree with you. I think this is, in fact, what is going on. When we did research in Greenland, for instance, we asked people, we invited them to be co-authors, we invited them to participate in the research program so that they would end having some capacities. Not that we would end having more capacities, so that they would end have. And we were trying to get money to a program using art. We got the money for a program in Greenland, but not in Denmark, which is also interesting. To use art with young immigrant Arab guys. Of course, they are Danish now. But I also considered, we say, people with another ethnicity than Danish. So you are defined negatively. No. So where you invite these guys into the community, and they have a lot of good solutions, and they have a lot of energy, and they have a lot, as Michael Ungar said, they are the ones who can teach us about violence prevention, about building social resilience, about caring for the family, and so on and so on.
Just before there are some interesting solutions to other countries are wrestling with the same problem. If I would just direct you to look at, there's an American fellow named Bill Strickland, Strickland. His name is Bill Strickland. And he started a project in inner city Pittsburgh, I believe, in which he himself is an African-American man, grew up in the poverty of that community. And he just started this amazing enterprise initiative. And he's replicated the same model in now about 80 different communities across North America. in which he works with very marginalized communities to create economic wealth within the community in partnership with business and government. It's a very interesting model, but he's found a solution to working locally from the community up to create, that doesn't require people to train into university educated positions, but to find market niches of jobs that are not filled, that there are not enough people doing in the community, but that still require a certain amount of training. And he's got this magical formula that's really working quite successfully. And in my own country, there's a program called Pathways to Education, which is a website, pathwaystoeducation.ca for Canada. And it's a program that's taking very marginalized youth and getting them to finish high school. So they specifically target communities like a housing development where the dropout rate from high school could be as high as 75%. So only 25% of children are completing high school. They go in, and it's an interesting program that works with children for 4 years and can get high school completion rates up to over 90% in just a very short period of time. This was another solution that was grown out of a community itself that the community helped design, as opposed to, say, coming from a bunch of academics deciding what the community needed. So all to say is, I think your point is well taken. There are great examples around the world where people are working from the community up to solve problems, and I wish you well finding those. There was another comment.
The free schools in Denmark, I think they have a certain way of solving problems that I think we could be inspired by in the folk schools, because the parents are in this democratic process. They can go to the school and they volunteer, do all sort of stuff in the school to help build up the school, and let's make them feel like they own the school. And the children, they don't want to ruin stuff in the school because their dad has made some of the playground and stuff like that. I think that is something that we should. There's a challenge that the Danish folk school has been more sort of controlled from the top, and this means that I think that some of the children might and the parents might lose a community there, because they actually feel like they can't influence on things in the same way as they could earlier, actually. And that's the thing I think would be good to think about.
I think that's Sita.
Good point. Very, very good point.
Hi, I'm Sita. I come from Save the Children. And we are working with resilience, child resilience programs, both internationally in the developing world as well as in Denmark. Actually, it's quite interesting because we have started to work in Denmark with resilience only now, using some of the methodologies that we used in the developing world. So it's really the other way around than usually. And Peter Berliner is also supporting us in this project. And therefore, of course, we've also looked very much into what has been written about resilience and what other methodologies or what methodologies other people are using around the world. Like you said also earlier, Michael, there are lots of Western studies. And I was happy to hear that in one of your studies you included a lot of non-Western countries, but there are not a lot of such studies. So if you have some interesting learning from some of these other studies, like if there are some issues you could kind of point at which are different from what we have in the Western studies, I would be quite interested in hearing that. But maybe that's not for today, I don't know.
Well, but I can hint at a couple that might be of interest to a general population. Some of the ones that have intrigued me are, say, if you look at Teresa Betancourt's work, her last name is Betancourt. And if you look at her work in Sierra Leone with child soldiers, it has a lot of good information that could be useful for working with children involved in street gangs or street-involved youth. Because what she's talking about is how do you get children to get out of armies? How do you demobilize child soldiers? And much of the same patterns you see in those populations you could actually observe in children who are involved in delinquent gangs. The same pattern of inclusion and power. And if you want to get them out, her point is it takes a community to accept the child back. It's not just a matter of suppressing the behavior. You can't just stop it. You have to give the child a space where they feel powerful back in their families and their communities. And that's the hard part. The easy part is stopping. The hard part is to create the alternative, which is equally acceptable. If you look at Catherine Panter-Brick's work in Afghanistan, Catherine Panter-Brick, she's at Yale University now in the States. Her work in Afghanistan has been very useful. But I also like, if you just look around, if you were to type in, there's some interesting people in Africa doing work on what are called orphan-friendly communities. We tend to think of orphans as isolated individuals who have lost their parents. But if you actually look in more collectivist societies, say in Africa, you will see a pattern where communities have come around to create an environment that holds the child. So it's not just the emphasis on the family. The same with kinship adoption in patterns in North American Aboriginal communities. So Aboriginal peoples, First Nations, Native Americans, I guess go by different names, you'll see patterns where if a child cannot be raised by their family, they aren't given to the state, they're given to the extended family. And to be fair, I think our bias, and coming back to your comment earlier, I think our bias is that somehow we have the solutions, and I say we as the quote unquote, this white, Western educated model that my value system. In fact, what I find around the world is that my culture has huge deficits, huge problems. We are so individualistic that we miss the power of collective care for vulnerable children. We are so, especially in North America, we have other disadvantages, like unilingualism. Most Canadians and most Americans speak one language. What a horrible deficit in this world. The immigrants are far more resilient by speaking multiple languages. The fact that we are able to speak in English in Danish in Denmark says that you're probably more capacity to adapt by being bilingual or trilingual. Many of you are trilingual, I would imagine. That kind of capacity we overlook. I think there's a whole bias towards the indicators of what is resilience, when in fact when we look around the world there are strengths inside more collectivist immigrant populations, people who've had to deal, as Peter's comments earlier, people who have had to deal with incredible stressors often develop capacities that are not evident in the general population. Hope that helps.
Thank you. Well, I had, actually, this was like a side question. I had a real question as well.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I wanted to ask, in the project that we're just starting up in Denmark, in Danish schools, we are trying to look at also the environmental factors that promotes resilience. And what we are also looking at is factors like school management structures, teamwork versus non-teamwork across classes, for instance, classroom structure, classroom approach, learning methodologies, and relationships not only between the children but also between children and the teacher, teacher to teacher, teacher to management, and so on. Would you say these are factors that are worth looking at in terms of building a resilient environment around the children in schools?
I'll maybe make a quick comment. Peter can add. Absolutely. because what our work constantly shows that when you adapt the educational environment, you create the capacity for more resilience within the children. So all those structural factors within the school systems seem to have, and the research I think would support it, if you look across the educational resilience research, you'd see that same pattern, saying stronger, better organized schools seem to make children more capable of feeling like they engage at school, feel safe at school, and are better able to learn inside school, and therefore their long-term life goals seem to be better realized. So that more ecological interpretation of resilience would certainly fit with my own work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I see a few hands.
There's a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Mikkel Moldrup. I work in the psychiatry of the region of southern Denmark. I'm thinking it really impresses me how the old distinction between the individual and the social in this context is becoming like all outphased, anachronistic. I'm thinking about how developmental psychology and studies into the brain and neurological networks shows how the social context actually forms the brain of the child in the early years of their lifehood. And I am really appalled by the conditions in many preschools. I have 2 children in a kindergarten, and there are lots of things that I would love to see the pedagogues do that they can't because of resources, man-women hours. No man, by the way, in the kindergarten. And I'm saying this because I'm thinking, I think you also said a short while ago that the individual capacities can also be enhanced by favorable social conditions in the environment, and I totally agree with that. And I've been involved with a few projects of prevention, early intervention, early identification of children at risk, and early intervention with municipalities. And I'm thinking, well, I'd just like to share that one experience I had was a program that was supposed to train pedagogues and teachers in the first school years to always be curious, to look the children in the eyes, to be interested, to show interest, to be inclusive, to say the names of all of the children at the end and at the beginning of the end of the session, to always be interested in how the children are feeling that day, that particular day, and to see what language do the children have about feelings. Do they have a language for feelings? But sometimes they don't. And the results of that intervention amazed me, but also what amazed me was how difficult it was for the staff to learn these things. And they expressed great satisfaction with all that they had learned to do all this. And I was thinking by myself in a private moment afterwards, okay, so that's what they were doing 1 hour a week. What the heck are they doing the other hours, 36 hours of the week, where they had not been trained to recognize the children, look them in the eye, all of that. But it's just, I'm exaggerating, of course. It's just to make my point clear. Thank you.
Indeed, there's such a great overlap now. The neuropsychologists are proving what the social psychologists have also been theorizing in relation to resilience. So it's an amazing time of dynamic conversations happening. Something we're doing next year, actually, in Halifax, we'll have a major conference in June of next year, specifically bringing together people from all those different dimensions, looking at resilience from multiple dimensions. But you had a question. One last question?
Yeah, one more question.
I work as a pedagogue, and my question is about the inclusion that is very dominating in the Danish education system. I think it's mostly for Peter. Do you think that this inclusion that is dominating is a sign that we have a mental change in the community, in the society, that is more, it's better for building up resilience? Do you think it's one step in the right direction?
Yes, I can. My answer will be very short because yes, that would be yes. I think it is. I think the challenge now is that the idea is very, very, very good. That you have to look at how you invite children with different capacities into a group. But also we have to keep in mind that maybe we should then also change the group and say we can also benefit from all the diversity. So it's not just to invite in, it's also to listen to, so that people can have different needs. So, but basically I think it is good. What is less good is in this moment that we have these concepts and they come and they take us and we all speak about the same. We think, but maybe we are not speaking about the same. And then we have a lot of programs, and all the programs, and of course the programs, they are evidence-based, which is very good, but also sometimes it means that then we have to work in that way. So I think we should be very keen on being aware that we should not make the de-skilling of the professionals working in these institutions, because the personal contact, keeping in mind the 7 components you talked about today, Michael, would be very, very good. But still you work in an open process with the children, with the families. So see the programs and the concepts as inspiration, but work in the human contact.
I think we are running over time, but there's one marcation for one more question here.
Yeah, my name is Kuno Sørensen, psychologist by Save the Children. This is rather controversial, I think. We heard about the young men who don't get education, they leave school early, they have an identity crisis. And I don't know, Michael, if you have the same problems in Canada. I think in Denmark, the daycare in which many children go to are dominated by female culture or ways of handling things. And it passes on when they go to school that the boys have difficulties in finding their own identity within this school culture. And maybe, that's my question, maybe because it's now so dominated by women culture that the boys have difficulties in finding their own identities and values within this culture in the school system and even starting at the daycare system. Wow.
Yeah, that would take about 3 hours to deconstruct, eh? There's no definitive research on this, but it is a growing concern. I mean, are we educating in a way, is there in fact a gendered educational, it's a huge issue to look at. I don't have a definite answer. It's an interesting question that probably deserves being asked, at least. Whether or not it's true or not is an interesting point, but it probably is a question that should be at least raised.
Some studies show that if you ask the dropouts of school, if you ask them themselves, they will not mention this as a big problem, but they will come back to the social justice. They will say, but we were not, they did not treat us fairly in the school system. Yeah. I was different. So they will also do the individualization of this. They will say, I was different. I did not fit in, and then they were not fair to me. And that will be the main explanations if you ask the young people themselves, the ones dropping out of education. And but I think, of course, we should be aware of the other challenge. But I think it's more about social justice. And you can be, and maybe you are more often, you can be a man and you can do acts of injustice. Or you can be a woman and you can do the same. So what they are looking at is the social justice. So, but I think we should come back to, I think we should have more of the 3 grandmothers in the schools. So I think we should have more mothers in the schools. So. I think I can see on you, Annette, that it's time to close. So I would like to say thank you very much to all of you for coming and participating in this discussion. Michael Ungar came on quite a short notice, and I hope that we can get you to come again at a certain time, and that we can meet again and have more discussion on this. I think also, as you said in the back of the room, I think we have to think differently. I think we have to start to develop new methods and ideas working with this, and as Michael just said, also work from down to up. And we can even challenge the words. We can say, but why is this down to up? No, maybe this is from up to down. Up in the communities and down to the academics. So I think that is what we definitely should do. I would also like to say again to you, thank you very much for coming. It has been very inspiring. We got a lot of information, a lot of ideas, and a lot of beautiful stories. I'm sure we will remember the stories, but also your concepts and your theory about this. Thank you very much.
Very much appreciate it.